Hi there, I'm Andy from UVM Extension Ag Engineering, and today we're tearing apart a 23-year-old vegetable brush washer. We've got a few boxes of many new parts that we're going to put into this thing and clean it up so it's ready to go for the next season. We're going to be replacing nearly everything on this but the frame. I've got a whole box of new absorbing donuts. We even got a new conveyor belt. So all the plastic splash guards will be replaced. These absorbing donuts will be replaced, as will be the brushes. And when I talked to the manufacturer, they recommended that not only replacing the brushes, but replacing these bushings as well, as everything gets rusted and really hard to just replace. And they recommend not just replacing parts, but completely rebuilding the machine. Now, I've never taken apart a brush washer before, but I am fairly mechanically inclined, so I'm not too intimidated. I am expecting this to take quite a while as all the bolts and everything are really rusty and covered in dirt, so it's going to be a challenge to get it all apart. I'm going to take you with me along the journey on rebuilding this machine, but I'm not going to go full step-by-step detailed instructions and tell you every single bolt to remove, especially because every machine might be a little bit different, so we'll just kind of go through the steps together. So with that, let's get started. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is just try to open this thing up and figure out how it comes apart, take off these chain guides, and go from there. This is a good reminder here before we get too carried away that as you're taking any piece of equipment or machinery apart, you really should take pictures along the way. That way you don't forget on how things go back together. Warning, you should never run machinery with the guards off. At least don't stick your fingers in there, all right? When I turned it on before I worked on it, something was clunking and grinding, so I immediately turned it off, and that's why I rolled it around by hand once I took the guards off at first, just to make sure everything was aligned up the way it was supposed to be and things were operating smoothly. My guess is that something was just hitting the chain guard and it needed to be adjusted. Now that I've confirmed the thing works right now, I can pay attention to how it comes apart, and then I can unplug it and complete the disassembly. So by holding up the flap, I'm able to reach in there and remove this side curtain bolt, as well as the one up here, which holds the motor. There, the 4 bolts that hold the motor are now removed. After reaching in with my impact driver to remove those 4 nuts, I gave this curtain a wiggle and it dropped down, and now I can remove it. Now with this side curtain removed, I can easily see the other side and confirm I've got one more screw hidden up behind this spray bar. Last bolt, here we go. Now this curtain should be free, I believe. Yep. Give it a little tug. Pull little jimmy here. It's around some other components. Okay, looks like it's around this water line, so may have to undo that. Easiest to loosen the hose clamp and just remove said fitting. There. I like that view a lot better. Now I can see to get these final screws off the splash guard in the middle, as well as the one on the end. I wonder if we really need this splash guard in the middle. I mean, why? If there's one on the end. Now that I lifted that off, I can fight with these plastic shields on the outside on the workbench and clean this really well. Make sure these nozzles are cleaned up, get all the mud off, give us some fresh paint while we're in here. So I just was able to get the lid off as well as the side panels, which was nice, gave me a lot of access to stuff. So in order to take the lid off, the lid is secured via the same screws as those side splash guards, which here you can see they've threaded those bolts into the side. So you've got 4 bolts on each side of the inside, then it's just snug fit in between these rails. So I was able to take a hammer on the inside, making sure not to hit any of the nozzles or anything, and pry it up out from between these rails, and then boom, it gives me access to all these brushes. Not bad. This here is another good spot for a photo. There's 3 carriage bolts that hold that wooden piece with plastic chain guide on it. And it looks like this chain has plenty of slack where you can just pick it up and take it off. Ta-da! Okay, I'll be honest, this is where I'm starting to get a little puzzled. I took almost everything off as far as the guards and side panels and stuff like that. Got the chain off this side here. And I can't figure out how to actually remove the brushes. So what I did is I went to look at the new parts that I got to try to figure out how they'd go in. So this here is the parts that I received in the rebuild kit. Got a new conveyor belt, got some new side panels and divider curtains, got a bunch of axles, got about 20 of these bushings, 4 of these bushings with a collar, a bunch of key pins here, must be to hold the axles on. Got a box of brushes that you saw at the very beginning, and then a box of these donuts too. So that's kind of what I got to work with. Looking at these axles, looks like the majority of them are all the same length except for 2, and they have a keyway in it here for the pin, and then looks like a key slot here. So maybe those gears just pull off really difficultly. That must be how they do it. It's just a keyway on there. So I'll have to figure out the right tool in order to pry those rusty things off, because I don't have any new sprockets, so I have to reuse the sprockets and the keys in order to fit onto these new axles that go inside these bushings. So let's figure that out. Okay, so in short, I answered my question, but in doing so, I phoned a friend, and not just a friend, but the manufacturer of this piece of equipment. I called Harvey down at AZS. He knows me pretty well. We've worked closely together about this and other equipment, their rinse conveyor as well, which is pretty sweet. So I gave him a call, and he happened to pick up, which was great while I'm working on this. That was awesome, because I asked, how do I take the brushes off? Because it wasn't incredibly clear to me. I wasn't sure if I needed to dig around to find the pin that I have on the counter over there, drive the pin out, and then the whole thing's supposed to come out. In short answer, yes. So about an inch in on the brushes, I found one here. It was between the second and the third bristles. So here's the first row, here's the second row, and this is the third row of bristles. And I think this rusty round spot there is the keyway that I need to pound out. Now, he made the comment that it does not go all the way through the bristle, or through the brush, but if I can pound that out, it will cut its way through the brush on the other side. So that's one method. He said, however, that doesn't usually work because that key gets rusted to the shaft and it just mangles up and doesn't push out. So therefore, he recommends you have to cut it, and in order to cut it, either with a hacksaw, Sawzall, something like that, cut it this side of the keyway. That way, you can remove the axle with the sprocket on it from this side. Otherwise, if you cut it on the other side of the key, you'll have the key and it won't come out. But if you cut it this side of the key, then you can slide out this little nubber of axle that's left, and then you can take the rest of the brush and pull it. Hopefully you should have enough space then to slide it over and lift it up outside of the bushing and remove it there. He said that these sprockets are welded on, which is what their little roundness is, and why I don't see a keyway shaft, and they also didn't want to pull. Now it looks like I was hammering on it to try to break it loose to see if it would pry off of a keyway shaft or something. It looks like I actually broke the welds here. So there was a couple things. I could grind off the sprockets with a grinder and reuse them, weld them onto the new shaft. Not ideal, obviously. Looking at these sprockets, they're actually kind of sharp, which means they've definitely worn down and they probably should be replaced anyways. If I'm replacing brushes and axles, I might as well replace the sprockets as well. So I'm gonna order those, but I'm gonna wait until tomorrow. I'm gonna finish disassembling everything, hacking it apart. That way, if I need to order anything else that got missed or broken in the process, I can do that and they can just ship it all in one package. So I'm gonna keep disassembling it and order new sprockets while we're in here. We were also talking about these absorbing donuts and how they come apart. They come apart by undoing these vertical bolts. These are really long bolts here. And you can see there's actually some give in this, which I didn't realize until I was on the phone with him, which was really great. And that there is compressing the orange or the sponge donuts. And he says you want about 1/8 to 1/4 inch of squish. So these nuts need to be adjusted accordingly. If there's not enough tension, they're not gonna spin. If there's too much, they could essentially like strip themselves out. Teardrop, he kept saying, a teardrop out the hole. So these donuts actually kind of self-fuse to their axle shaft. And as you take them apart, you'll notice they kind of stick to that shaft, and you kind of want that, I guess. That way they rotate on the shaft and not just spin, and then they'll strip out and wear out the donut prematurely. So that's where tension is really important, as I just learned today. So that was a very helpful phone call. He didn't seem too excited when I asked about replacing these axles. He said sometimes the rustiness actually helps them grip inside the donut a little bit, which I get. Same with the rollers on the bottom that squeeze it out. He says if they're too smooth, then it doesn't help the ringing action. So I'm gonna take these off and wire brush them because I don't like the flaky scaliness of them in the raw food environment, and they're pretty gross in my opinion, so I'm gonna wire brush them really good. Make them shiny again. I think that's probably something that should be done regularly, and then figure out, make sure I get this bar adjusted just right when I put it all back together. He did say just by removing these long vertical bolts here and removing that, I should be able to remove the shafts for the donut replacement and do not need to take apart all the sprockets and chain and stuff. I'm probably gonna take it all apart just so I can clean it really good and inspect it. So we'll see how that goes. So you can see these sprockets are kind of sharp. He said they're really old and they didn't use that design going forward, so not every brush washer will be the same, obviously. And then here you can see these sprockets have some meat left. They're not all pointy, so they're probably good to keep using for a while. Because I have new shafts and I don't have an awl, I'm not even gonna bother to try to pound out the pin. I'm just gonna hack them out. So let's go with the hacksaw. Got it. Yep, definitely rusty inside of the plastic shaft, which made it nice and fat there. Hard to come through the hole. Nice. There you can see the old bushing has a nice flat spot on it because it was making a teardrop shape, worn down. All right, so the method for removing the brushes has been figured out. I Sawzall it off, and then I actually Sawzall into the bushing as well, and then I can pull that out between a screwdriver and a pair of pliers. Only 9 more to go. Okay, so I got 5 brushes out so far and ran out of battery. So I guess that's all for that part for today. Unless the farmer here that I'm at has a plug-in Sawzall, which he probably does, which I may go get in a minute. But so I got 5 of the brushes out. I found cutting them off worked well. The hacksaw worked okay, but the grinder / cutoff wheel worked the best. I did take the guard and rotate the guard around so it wasn't shooting the sparks directly on the next brush, because that was melting them and starting to smoke. So I thought that if I could just slide that guard around, it would shield a lot of the sparks from starting a fire. So don't need to be doing that. But that went a lot faster with a cutoff wheel. And then I could just hammer or pry out the sprockets, which worked fine. So then I came over here to that wooden bar with the long bolts in it, undid the nuts on those long bolts, and then that bar just slid off. And now that revealed these axles here with the rubber donuts. And the foam donuts now, I think, should just come off, although it looks like there's a collar here that I'll have to figure out. Okay, I figured it out already. Here on this collar there is a Allen set screw, and then this collar here will likely come off but that's gonna be all rusty. So I'm gonna find some PB Blaster or at least WD-40 before I even attempt those, or I'll be grinding some more.
There, wire brushing complete. Time to wipe everything down, then I can paint.
So let's start putting this project back together. Where do I begin? Well, let's first at least tack the back end here onto the front half, so that's kind of together in one piece. Then we'll figure out how to put the brushes on. So first off, before the brushes, we have to put in these bushings, and these bushings seem to be pretty hard, so I'm able to just tap them with a hammer right into place from the outside in. There's a collar on the inside, so you don't need to worry about pressing them too far, but some holes may be a little stiffer than others due to paint drips getting inside. Now, the trick to getting these brushes on is you need to get a pin through the brush and into the axle shaft, and I measured this out so that I could find where on the brushes I needed to put the pin. And then lining up the pin with the shaft can be tricky. So I decided to drill a hole in the brush first. That way I could visibly line up the hole in the brush with the hole in the axle to drop the pin in and tap it in with a hammer. And in doing so, I measured and found that the right distance was about 3 bristles in on the brush. So if you look at the rows of bristles on the brush, you've got ones that start on the outside and then ones that start in just a little bit. If you start on the furthermost outside bristle, and then come in 3 and then go over, and you're going to drill next to that. So between the second and third on the row that is inset. Then the hole in the axle is in line with the keyway, so you can use that as a guide to know roughly where it is and look down through the hole that you just drilled to find the hole in the axle. It should be pretty close to flush with the outside bushings on the machine too. Rinse and repeat for all these brushes. Okay, so I think I figured out how to get these boards on. It's a little bit tricky because the bushings stick out a little on one side and they're flush on the other. And that took me a while to figure out. And they also needed to line up with these bolts here, so I guess I should have labeled them. I was trying to look at an old picture that I took before I took it apart, but I didn't take very good photos, just video, which I haven't even looked at yet, so that's not very helpful. But this chain guard piece is held on via these brackets here, and when I had that board flipped around, those bushings were in the way in order for this to clamp on flush against there, like the photo that I took shows. So I think I finally got those oriented appropriately. I'm gonna have to go to the hardware store and get more keyways for the sprockets because I got new sprockets and new axles, but they didn't send new keyways. So I'm gonna stop by the hardware store. That should be a standard item. If not, I'll have to order some. So I can't put the sprockets on yet today, and I don't want to set the pins in the brushes until I have all the sprockets and stuff lined up and make sure that I have the right axles in the right spot, etc. So before I set that pin that's really hard to get out, I decided to wait on that, and I can drop that in later. So now that I got these boards in place, I guess it's time to figure out how to put the lower absorbing rod axles in. They're just a steel rod across the bottom, and then the absorbing donuts go on shafts, and those go in these upper holes here, and then it all gets connected via chains and sprockets. So the puzzle continues. Well, I'm at a stopping point again for today. I forgot all the axles for the absorber side of the unit in my garage after wire brushing them, so I can't put that end together until I have those. I need to buy some keys for the sprockets, so I can't put the sprockets on, and I can't put the chains on without the sprockets, so that's at a standstill. And then I decided I'm going to buy a new piece of tubing for the spray bar that goes on the roof of the unit, because the one that was in there was really dirty, and it wasn't worth cleaning, so I thought I'd start fresh because it's only a cheap piece of tube. So I'll pick up one of those, and then I can assemble the top part of the machine as well. But I laid everything out to make sure it was all going back together the way it was supposed to, and I didn't need to buy anything else. So far, so good. I might need a few bolts to tie a few things together, but I think I've got pretty much everything I need. All right, I am back. I remembered to get all the parts that I needed that I left in my garage. So I got the axle shafts for the absorber unit, and I stopped by the hardware store and picked up a handful of keys for the sprockets because I was missing some for all the new ones. And now it's time to get this machine back together. Put the sprockets on, and we'll just go through it. So let's get started again. These sprockets are all just set in place, as I wanted to make sure everything was lining up the last time I was here. So I'm putting all the keys on the sprockets, and then I'm gonna drive the pins into the brushes. And then once the brushes are on the correct spot on the axle, then I will tighten down the sprockets. Actually, I'll probably tighten up the sprockets after I put the chain on to make sure everything is in pretty close alignment.
we finally made progress on this brush washer project, and I am just about complete. Everything that's left to do, I will do when I come back to see it in action, because cucumbers will be ready to come out of the field here at this farm in another week or so. So I'll stop back and get some footage of it running produce through it. The only thing I have left to do is to put the guards back on and to put a couple transition plastic PVC boards at the entrance in between the brushes and the end unit, and then where the end unit falls off. So it'll just help the produce transition through each of those 3 stages. So I got those put on, and I realized I'm missing a couple pieces of the nozzles. I'm probably just gonna order all new nozzles because those were the originals and they were pretty dirty anyways. But all in all, today was a good day, another long day, but we finally got everything together. All the sprockets on, all the chains on, got that lubed up. Got all the brushes on, the absorbers on, and the splash guards on. Finally, feels good and it looks nice.